There has been an awakening. Have you felt it? Zunesha's on Wano, and the five elders are discussing a mysterious devil fruit, the name of which was hidden from the annals of history. So that's surprising, but what could it mean? What devil fruit were the world government leaders discussing, and what role will Zunesha play in Wano's final act? In today's video, we're going to analyze what these surprising developments could mean, and try to identify this mysterious devil fruit. On the final page of chapter 1037, we quickly cut back and forth between two seemingly concurrent scenes, one taking place outside of Wano, and the other inside Pangaea Castle. The manner in which Oda layers these two scenes suggests the five elders are reacting to the news of Zunesha's arrival, and their brief exchange indicates that a mysterious devil fruit power is involved. Before unpacking this scene, let's first quickly review what we know about Zunesha, the massive elephant which carries the island of Zoan on its back. We know Zunesha became the home for the Mink tribe roughly 1,000 years ago, approximately 200 years before the Void Century, in the year 500 in the Age of the Sea Circle, or Kaienreki. At an unspecified point in time, Zunesha committed a yet-to-be-identified crime, and ever since has only been permitted to walk. We learned in chapter 822 that Zunesha can only do as commanded, specifically by Momonosuke, though Luffy could also hear its voice. It wasn't specified whether or not they could also hear Zunesha, but Roger and Odin both indicated they sensed something foreboding while on Zoan. Based on available evidence, it seems this is somehow related to the voice of all things, a power which thus far has only been demonstrated by Luffy, Roger, Odin, and Momo. It seems Oda is drawing on two primary sources of inspiration in creating the land atop an elephant's back. Zunesha specifically belongs to the species identified as Naitame Narita elephants, which feature extraordinarily long legs extended all the way to the sea floor. Visually, their design is inspired by a 1948 painting titled The Elephants by Spanish surrealist painter Salvador Dali. Zunesha's role is also seemingly based on the world elephant concept from Hindu cosmology. It's believed the world is carried on the back of either 4 or 8 cosmic elephants. Zunesha's name is further inspired by Ganesha, an elephant-headed deity belonging to the Hindu pantheon. The modern popular rendition of the world elephant concept includes a world turtle atop which the elephants stand. However, there is some debate whether or not the world elephant concept was misinterpreted based on the dual meaning of the Sanskrit word naga, which can be read as either serpent or elephant. Zunesha's words, heard only by Momo and Luffy, indicate regret for committing this great crime and a strong desire to protect the minks carried atop its back. Miyagi further indicated that Zunesha has been walking toward an unspecified destination and wondered where that might be. It seems we now have an answer to that question with Zunesha's arrival in the waters outside Wano at the end of chapter 1037. While Zunesha's arrival made for an impactful and intriguing cliffhanger on its own, the most interesting detail was the cryptic conversation by which it was accompanied. One page earlier, the five elders, the outward-facing leaders of the world government, were shown in Marishwa discussing the fallout of the recent reverie and their plans to assassinate Nico Robin under the cover of the current war on Onigashima. The scene then cut to the world government fleet making their approach to the land of samurai. The lookout reported a massive shadow up ahead, resembling an island. The scene then suddenly jumped back to the five elders, now in the middle of a completely separate discussion about an unspecified devil fruit awakening after centuries of dormancy. In the last panel, we see the shadow of Zunesha, eyes glowing in the mist, towering over the darkened waters and fleet of government ships as we're left to guess what devil fruit might have compelled its millennium-long march toward Wano, and what this development could mean for the concluding chapters of this epic story saga. Oda loves withholding information and using intentional ambiguity to build suspense and to generate questions in the minds of readers. These are quintessential elements belonging to the mystery box approach to storytelling, but even for Oda, the final pages of chapter 1037 were incredibly cryptic, particularly in the way the panels jump back and forth between two potentially unrelated scenes. Importantly, Oda didn't show us what prompted the surprised response from the elders on the final page of the chapter, and though the two dialogue bubbles in the last panel imply they're discussing Zunesha, we can't discount the possibility that this represents an intentional misdirect. We're thus forced to answer a series of questions. First, are they even talking about Zunesha, or is the devil fruit in question completely unrelated? In either case, what is the true identity of this mysterious devil fruit, and why was its name erased from the pages of history? So let's first examine the exact sequence of panels and analyze the words spoken by the five elders to ascertain whether or not Zunesha is in fact the topic of conversation. At the bottom of page 16, we see the fleet of government ships sailing toward Wano. The sky in the distance appears to be darkened, and the lookout says he sees a shadow up ahead, which could indicate the island-sized shadow is in the direction the ships are sailing. However, we see Zunesha approaching from behind the fleet of government ships, which, coupled with the ambiguity of the dialogue, suggests the lookout may be reporting another separate island-sized object. However, by examining the sequence, I think we can fully refute this possibility. Oda shaded the night sky in the exact same manner in chapter 1028 when we first saw the world government fleet in the waters offshore, so there's no change in what the lookout is seeing up ahead. Further, Rob Lucci is in contact with CP0, and thus the fleet are already aware of Onigashima being lifted by Kaido's devil fruit. Thus, an island-sized object in the skies above Wano wouldn't come as a surprise. It's also notable that the agent in the crow's nest is looking in the opposite direction of the wind, as evidenced by the flag on the ship's mast. We can see in the wide view panel that the world government fleet have a tailwind, meaning despite the fact that he used the phrase up ahead, he is in fact viewing the ocean on the stern side of the ship. I think we can thus say with a reasonable degree of certainty that the lookout is in fact reporting on Zunesha's appearance, and thus it stands to reason that this new piece of information likely prompted the response from the elders on page 17. We jump into the scene featuring the 5 elders mid-conversation as the Mikhail Gorbachev elder says no, that's impossible. That fruit is only a legend now even to us. It has not awakened for centuries upon centuries. The blonde-haired elder then interjects, then why would the world government bother to give that one specific devil fruit another name? It's to erase that fruit's name from the annals of history, isn't it? So as interesting as the implications here are, we don't know what they're responding to, nor do we know which fruit they're discussing. But we can intuit a few details for certain from the dialogue. First, that the elders have been seemingly unaware of this unnamed devil fruit's location for quite some time, as they say it has become a legend even to them. The phrase even to us is quite interesting in that it implies the elders believe they should have special knowledge of devil fruit. This isn't entirely surprising, as I believe the devil fruit may be the power by which the 20 kings triumphed over the Forgotten Kingdom erased during the Void Century, though that theory has not yet been confirmed. Second, we know devil fruit are cataloged in a book available to ordinary people, and the fact that the world government were able to mask this unidentified devil fruit's name suggests that they had a hand in drafting this text, further linking them to the origin of devil fruit themselves. This further means that though the world government masked the true name of this devil fruit, it is presently known by a different name. Apparently, the true name of this devil fruit power is sensitive, perhaps because it somehow betrays a secret the world government would like to maintain. The particular language used in the scene is important, because it may also tell us quite a bit about the elders themselves. Note that the blonde elder refers to the world government erasing the name of this fruit from the annals of history. As I have mentioned in earlier videos, given their battle scars and worldview, I suspect the 5 elders may be the last of the 20 kings with first-hand knowledge of the events of the Void Century. The blonde elder's question in this scene is rhetorical, meaning he's attempting to persuade through asking a question to which he already knows the answer. Importantly, he's not searching for information. The elders know this fruit's true name, and they know the reason it was excised from the history books. Thus, though this scene doesn't necessarily suggest the 5 elders have been alive for centuries, it also doesn't exclude that possibility. The world government apparently lost track of this power as it remained dormant for centuries, but now that it has awakened, they're responding with incredulity that this fruit has suddenly re-emerged in awakened state, which could perhaps expose its true name. It's also interesting to note that the elders are somehow aware, through whatever information they were told, that this fruit has not only re-emerged, but awakened. This begs the question how they have such knowledge. Does the manner in which this ability has manifest somehow indicate the fact that it has awakened, or are the elders somehow able to sense the awakening of a devil fruit power? It's very difficult to say without knowing how they're affiliated. The panel progression leads us to believe the fruit in question concerns Zunesha's arrival, and I believe that's almost certainly the case, but because of the intentional ambiguity, we can't fully discount the possibility they're discussing another fruit entirely. In particular, the Gomu fruit and the mythical fish fruit have both been focal points on Wano, so it's possible either of those could instead be the topic of the elders' conversation. Those of you who have been following my channel may recall that the first theory video I ever posted concerned Kaido's mythical devil fruit. For the past several months, I've been working on a follow-up to that original theory, which is quite substantial in length. I'm hoping to release it very soon, so I won't delve into a deep conversation on the topic of Kaido and his devil fruit in this video, but I do believe the mythical dragon fruit may be one of the most important in the entire series, which was once treasured by the celestial dragons on God Valley, potentially intended for Shanks, targeted by Rock's Beck, defended by Roger and Garp, stolen by Big Mom, gifted to Kaido, replicated by Vegapunk, mimicked by Momonosuke, and is now coveted by Blackbeard. It seems there's a remote possibility Momo's dragon form and his attempts to prevent Onegishima's descent are the topic which inspired such incredulity on the part of the Five Elders, but it's a pretty big reach and doesn't really have any basis in what we're seeing in this week's chapter. While I do believe Kaido's devil fruit will soon receive quite a bit of focus unless Momo has suddenly awakened off-panel, I don't think the mythical fish fruit makes much sense as the focal point of this conversation. The devil fruit in question is a legend even to the Five Elders, which means they were unaware of its location. This description doesn't fit the mythical fish fruit or the Gomu fruit. The God Valley incident during which Kaido acquired his devil fruit took place 38 years ago, and the world government more recently experimented on Kaido to replicate his power. The Gomu fruit was also in the world government's possession until Shanks stole it from Who's Who's ship 12 years ago, and Luffy hasn't exactly kept his powers hidden. On a related note, Luffy hasn't shown any signs of awakening his power yet, and the Gorbachev Elder specified that they're talking about the awakening of a particular devil fruit. So then it seems almost certain the Five Elders are in fact discussing Zunesha, an awakened devil fruit power which somehow relates to its sudden arrival. Thus, it seems there are several different possibilities for what this devil fruit could be. Are they discussing a devil fruit which controls Zunesha, or a fruit eaten by the island-sized elephant itself? My first impression was that the devil fruit power now awakening is that which binds Zunesha to Momo's command. Zunesha wasn't even able to defend itself from Jack's assault unless ordered to fight by Momo, indicating there is something unique about their bond and the particular conditions which compel Zunesha to walk endlessly. As noted, we learn that Zunesha can only take orders from Momonosuke, who, after reading his father's journal, concluded that his survival is of the utmost imperative, because of the role he's someday destined to play in world events. Momo's global importance and his ability to command Zunesha are inherently linked, as the Minks and the Kozuki Clan of Wano have been unified for centuries in their mission to protect road poneglyphs, guard the path to One Piece, and to await the arrival of the prophesied New Dawn. When Zunesha attacked Jack, Oda drew particular attention to its eyes, which feature the same distinct circular iris pattern as both Lord Emu and Dracula Mihawk. I'm not entirely certain what this pattern might mean, if anything, but Zunesha's eyes are glowing in the final panel of 1037, indicating the awakened power being discussed by the Five Elders somehow relates to Zunesha's ability to receive and obey commands from Momonosuke, particularly given that Momo was also able to see through Zunesha's eyes while the two were in communion during the Zou story arc. We'll discuss this further, but we first have to rule out the alternatives. Another possibility, which in my opinion isn't nearly as likely, is that the Five Elders' words suggest Zunesha itself has eaten a devil fruit of some kind. Could this mean Zunesha's present elephant form is resultant from a Zoan fruit transformation? Perhaps Zunesha isn't even an elephant, but some other being which consumed a mythical elephant's devil fruit. We know the ordinary Elephant Zoan was infused into Spandam's sword Funkfreet, but perhaps Zunesha consumed a mythical variant. If so, Zunesha would likely be a massive being even in its non-transformed state, perhaps an even larger variant of the continent-pulling ancient giants like Oars. Unlikely given the fact that Zunesha doesn't have horns, and we see Kaido and Yamato, seemingly members of the Oni race, both maintain their horns in their transformed state. While the possibility Zunesha ate a mythical Elephant Zoan fruit of some kind remains on the table, I don't think it's particularly probable based on what we already know. First, Zunesha has been endlessly walking the world seas, which might be a bit of a problem for a Zoan fruit user, given that devil fruit users are cursed by the power of the sea with the inability to swim. While Zunesha isn't quite swimming, we have seen that the ocean's power drains the energy of devil fruit users when they're in contact with the water, yet Zunesha remains constantly on the move. That being said, battleship Sanwan Wolf is able to stand in the ocean despite being weakened by his devil fruit power, so maybe Zunesha could do the same. Oda specified in the Volume 41 SBS that devil fruit users are more or less powerless when completely submerged, but that the effects of the sea's curse are reduced if only their limbs or a portion of their body is underwater. Zunesha's limbs may extend to the seafloor, but the majority of its body towers high above the waves, so it's possible the sea's curse doesn't apply or isn't powerful enough to significantly drain its energy or restrict its movement. That being said, a bigger point of contention for me personally is that we know the Kingdom of Zou was founded on Zunesha's back almost 1,000 years ago, 200 years before the start of the Void Century. The truth is we don't yet know what devil fruit are or where they originated, but I think it's likely they came into being during the Void Century. If this is the case, then Zunesha already existing in elephant form 200 years before the start of the 100-year void would likely prohibit its elephant form from arising through a zone transformation. Not to mention the existence of Zou isn't news to the world government. Its location may remain hidden, but legends of the land atop an elephant's back are known all over the world. So it's not entirely clear why the world government would have any interest in hiding the name of a mythical Elephant Zoan fruit. After all, it's the name of the fruit which the government is most interested in hiding. Gorbachev Elder said this fruit is a legend even to them at this point, indicating they were unaware of its location. And I'm not sure this would accurately describe Zou. Surely if the power transforms its user into an island-sized elephant, the described homeland of the Minks would give them a pretty good idea of where it was located, even considering the Mokomo dukedom's aversion to unwanted outsiders. So while I believe it's important to remain open to other possibilities, I keep returning to the idea that the devil fruit power being discussed by the Five Elders is that which first compelled Zunesha's march and now binds it to Momo's command. But what might this mean, and what could be the true identity of this devil fruit power? I think we need to further analyze the nature of this bond between Momo and Zunesha to better understand what this power might be and why it was hidden. What's interesting to note is that Zunesha has been alive for a millennium, but Momo was only born 28 years ago. Meaning if a devil fruit power explains their connection, it represents the lingering influence of a devil fruit power long after its original user perished. Someone who lived centuries earlier would have issued the command which bound Zunesha to either the Kozuki Clan in general or a particular figure who hadn't been born at the time Zunesha was swayed or cursed. I have seen other theories which draw parallels between Momo's command over Zunesha and Shirahoshi's ability to command the Sea Kings. While I understand why people make these comparisons, I actually believe their abilities are quite dissimilar. Zunesha is entirely unable to act without direct command from Momonosuke. In fact, I believe his desperate struggle to prevent Onigashima from falling on the Flower Capital may have inadvertently summoned Zunesha. On the other hand, while the Sea Kings regard Shirahoshi as their sovereign, they also retain the ability to act on their own. They arrived on Fishman Island when Shirahoshi called, but also protected Noah without any direct orders to do so. The truth is we know very little about Shirahoshi's Poseidon powers. Even the Sea Kings do not know why every few centuries their sovereign is born in the form of a mermaid. They lent their power to Luffy on Fishman Island because they were called by Shirahoshi, but their particular course of action, grabbing hold of Noah before it was destroyed and then resting it on the seafloor where it could be restored by Den, seemed to be decided without direct command from Shirahoshi. Conversely, Zunesha seems to be entirely lacking in autonomy. Although I believe these two abilities are functionally quite different, it's important we consider all angles. Neptune described Shirahoshi's power as having awakened, despite the fact that she hasn't eaten a devil fruit, so perhaps this could provide a direct link between her being Poseidon and whatever sway Momo has over Zunesha. But nevertheless, I don't believe this is the case. When we really analyze the possibility Momo's power is equivalent to Shirahoshi's, I believe the argument quickly falls apart. This would imply Shirahoshi's reign over the world Sea Kings was also born from a devil fruit power, and thus far there's no indication this is in fact the case. Moreover, this would also seemingly imply that Momo's power could be classified as an ancient weapon, as is Poseidon. We already know Pluton is a ship located somewhere in Alabasta, leaving Uranus as the only unidentified weapon. This could then lead to the conclusion that Momo's sway over Zunesha and the true alternative name for the devil fruit which bound the two together is the ancient weapon Uranus. But I think this would be pretty strange, as it would imply the weapon itself is just a devil fruit power. I don't want to get too far off track in this video, as I don't personally believe Momo's connection to Zunesha is equivalent to Shirahoshi's power, but I have seen this theory mentioned from time to time, and thus it seemed worth discussing. So what we're really looking for is a devil fruit power which could have once compelled Zunesha to do only as commanded by a specific person, and interestingly, I believe we may have seen that very power at work during the Wano arc in its non-awakened state. The Pirate Mink Samurai Alliance is currently at war with the Beast Pirates, and though they were initially outnumbered, the tides have turned thanks in part to Otama and her Kibi no Mi. Inspired by the tale of Momotaro, Tama's devil fruit allows her to tame animals by feeding them kibidango created from her cheeks. Because the animal souls contained in Smile Fruit do not fully merge with their hosts, Tama is able to bend the gifters to her will. Weeks have passed in story since Tama first swayed speed, and thus far there are no signs of her power weakening. This means the duration of this devil fruit power's effect is potentially indefinite, and given the scale and power possessed by some creatures in the One Piece world, like Zunesha, it's easy to imagine just how dangerous this power could become in its awakened state. Now, I'm not necessarily suggesting Otama is the one currently commanding Zunesha, as that power seemingly belongs to Momonosuke. But then how can this be? If Tama's fruit has swayed Zunesha, and Momo doesn't possess said fruit, then how does this answer our question? Well, we know the Minks and Kozuki have been allied for centuries, and that they have together awaited this prophesied new dawn. Zunesha's arrival at the end of this battle to open Wano's borders suggests that its 1,000-year odyssey was always meant to conclude on this night woven of 20 years. Those who recorded the true history and the tale of JoyBoy's voyage seemingly predicted the timing of these future events. So what if Zunesha was swayed by the person who possessed Tama's devil fruit during JoyBoy's era? As we see through the animals under Tama's control, the powers do not seem to dissipate with time, and perhaps depending on the nature of the command, this effect extends beyond the death of the devil fruit possessor. What if someone, perhaps a long-dead member of the Kozuki Clan, used Tama's power to order Zunesha's arrival on Wano 8 centuries later, and to obey only the command of the prophesied future shogun, who will order the borders to be opened in preparation for JoyBoy's return? This could explain why Zunesha can only take orders from Momonosuke. As for how the fruit wound up in Tama's possession, I believe there is good evidence she may descend from the Kozuki Clan. This is a topic I will discuss more in the future, but it's important to remember just how deliberate and consistent Oda has been regarding the lore and distribution of devil fruit throughout the One Piece world. Devil fruit are said to be incredibly rare, to the extent that they're regarded as myth or legend. They are specifically referred to as a treasure from the Grand Line, and accordingly, very few pirates outside the Grand Line are demonstrated to wield these powers. Oda introduced only 4 confirmed devil fruit users in the entire East Blue saga: Luffy, Buggy, Alvida, and Smoker. Even if we consider Monkey D. Dragon to be a likely 5th devil fruit user introduced during the East Blue saga, it's still remarkable how few characters derive their strength from the same source as Luffy in the first 2 years of publication. On Wano, it seems there is an abnormally high concentration of devil fruit powers among members of the Kozuki Clan, potentially due to their ongoing trade agreement with CP0, as the world government seems to be uniquely tapped into the source of devil fruit powers. Moreover, the Kozuki Clan reigned until recently, which means the fruit could have also once been in their possession, fitting with the idea that a Kozuki ancestor wielded Tama's devil fruit during the Void Century when the alliance with the Minks was first formed. Thus, perhaps Tama's devil fruit was on Wano because the one who first commanded Zunesha to walk died in the land of samurai, where the so-called Kibi fruit later regrew. Wano's borders have been closed for centuries, and thus if Tama's devil fruit was hidden away somewhere, perhaps inside the flower capital, this could explain why it became a legend even to the 5 elders. But how would they know Zunesha is presently under the influence of this power? How do they know it's awakened? My only guess is that somehow Zunesha's glowing eyes betray the fact that it's under the influence of this awakened devil fruit power, assuming the government agent in the crow's nest reported exactly as he observed. But even then, the fruit is now in Tama's possession, and if this line of thinking is correct, then it was the awakening of its previous wielder which bound Zunesha to Momo's command. So would the elders really describe this as reawakening? The only other option I can imagine is that the elders somehow know the fruit has awakened because they were aware that Zunesha was under its influence during the Void Century. All this might answer the how question, but it's much more difficult to explain why. Tama's devil fruit was identified as the Kibi no Mi through her Vivre card, though it hasn't yet been discussed in the story itself. Importantly, the elders suggest that the true name of this devil fruit has been hidden from the pages of history. So if the elders are in fact talking about the Kibi no Mi, what could be its true name, and why would the government want to erase it from history? Honestly, if they're talking about Tama's fruit, I don't have any great theories of my own about what this fruit might be called, so I began looking to see if there were any other ideas, and the most interesting I could find was a reposted Japanese theory. In short, the theory suggests that Tama's kibidango are meant to look like the full moon, and thus the true name of her devil fruit could be the Suki no Mi, the moon fruit. The idea is that in its awakened state, her ability somehow harnesses the power of the full moon, which could potentially even relate to the limitations placed on the mink's Sulong transformation. I couldn't find the actual source of this theory, and it does seem like a pretty big stretch, but I thought it was interesting and wanted to mention it nonetheless. Of course, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this topic. I believe the available evidence suggests the world government agent was reporting on the sudden appearance of Zunesha, and based on context clues, it would seem its arrival is what prompted the elders to become so alarmed. The devil fruit they're discussing is presently known by a different name, hasn't awakened in centuries, and its location was apparently unknown to even the 5 elders, causing it to fade into legend. Based on the fact that this fruit's location has been a mystery, I think we can rule out those like the Gomu fruit and the mythical fish fruit, which the government has had access to fairly recently. Zunesha possessing a mythical zone fruit of some kind is possible, as is the idea that the fruit which allows Momo to control Zunesha was once referred to as one of the ancient weapons. There are a lot of options on the table here, and while I believe Tama's Kibi no Mi offers the best explanation, I really want to hear your ideas down in the comments. So thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing and hit the bell icon. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate your support. But most important, make sure you let me know your thoughts down in the comments.